When the notice appeared on my front door that morning, I didn't react right away. The paper flapped lightly in the breeze, bright white against the dull brown of my porch. I could already guess who it was from. Riverside Meadows Homeowners Association. I'd seen that letterhead before, neat blue logo, the kind that looks polite until you read the words underneath. It said I was in violation of Community Code 14B, unauthorized exterior display. But I didn't need to read the rest. I knew what this was about. I looked up at the American flag swaying above my front yard, its red, white, and blue catching the early California sunlight. To me, that flag isn't decoration. It's a promise. A memory of the brothers I served with, Marines who never came home from the desert. I stood there for a while, reading that word violation. And I'll be honest, a part of me laughed. 22 years in the Marine Corps, survived mortar fire in Kandahar, dug trenches in 100-degree heat, watched friends bleed next to me. And now, back home in California, I was being written up for flying the same flag I fought under. That's when I decided I wasn't taking it down. Not for them. Not for anyone. It started small, a few letters, neatly folded, slid under my door every few days. Each one carried the same tone: failure to comply may result in penalties. The first fine was $50 a day. Then it jumped to $100. I tried calling the number listed at the bottom of the letter. No answer. Just a voicemail repeating office hours and community guidelines. So, I went to the next HOA meeting. It was held inside the clubhouse, air-conditioned, quiet, too clean to feel human. 5 people sat at a long table, papers stacked high, laptops open. Most of them had never even said hello to me before. When I walked in, the room went still. Not hostile, just cold. I explained that I was a veteran, that the flag was part of who I am. The woman in the center, the board president, didn't even look up from her laptop. She just said, "Sir, we're not questioning your service. We're enforcing community standards." I asked her what standard forbids the American flag. She didn't answer, just tapped her pen and said, "You'll receive further notice by mail." The next morning, I found another envelope on my porch. Same letterhead. This time, they threatened a property lien if I didn't comply within 7 days. I looked around the neighborhood, rows of identical houses, manicured lawns, matching mailboxes. A few neighbors watched from their driveways as I pulled the notice off my door. One of them, an older man with a golf cap, muttered something like, "Rules are rules." But rules, I thought, aren't supposed to strip away respect. That night, I sat alone at my kitchen table with the letter in front of me. The house was quiet, except for the ticking clock and the faint sound of traffic down the street. I ran my fingers over the printed words, "Final warning." Then I looked up, through the kitchen window, the flag outside caught the glow of the porch light. And right then, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't just angry. I was disappointed that after serving my country, this was what home had become. Have you ever felt like the rules were written for everyone except people like us? That's exactly how I felt that week. I'd lived in Riverside Meadows for over 12 years. Paid every HOA due on time. Mowed my lawn. Painted my fence. Never made trouble. But I started to notice small things, looks that lingered too long, conversations that stopped when I walked by. Once, when I wore my Marine cap to check the mail, a neighbor said quietly, "You people sure love your flags." I didn't even know how to respond. See, the funny thing about discrimination in 2025 is that it's polite now. It wears a smile, speaks in soft tones, and hides behind regulations. They didn't say it was because I'm black. They didn't have to. They just wrote "unauthorized display." A phrase so sterile, so bureaucratic, that it could erase everything I'd ever stood for. And maybe, just maybe, that's what bothered me most. That after all those years defending freedom overseas, I was now defending it in my own front yard. If you've ever had to fight for something that should have been yours by right, stay with me. Because what I discovered next changed everything. This story is part of something I started calling the HOA Justice series. It began after I realized how many homeowners, veterans, single moms, retirees, were getting pushed around by these so-called neighborhood associations. People who forgot that community means respect, not control. I may be retired from the Marines, but that doesn't mean I stopped fighting for what's right. In the Corps, we used to say, Semper Fi, always faithful. Faithful to the flag. Faithful to each other. Faithful to the idea that no man should have to bow to power when he stands in the truth. So, when the HOA tried to make me lower my flag, I decided to stand a little taller instead. I didn't sleep that night. It wasn't anger that kept me awake, it was disbelief. After everything I'd given to this country, how could something so simple feel like a fight all over again? I turned on the kitchen light and spread the letters across the table. 5 envelopes, all stamped with the same logo, Riverside Meadows HOA. Same tone. Same threat. Same arrogance. For a moment, I just stared at them. Then I opened my laptop. If 22 years in the Marines taught me anything, it's that you never go into battle blind. I typed in, "Can an HOA ban the American flag?" Thousands of results popped up, legal blogs, veterans forums, news articles. And buried among them, I found something that made me sit up straighter. The Freedom to Display the American Flag Act of 2005. It was right there in black and white. A homeowners association may not restrict or prevent a member of the association from displaying the flag of the United States on residential property. I read it twice. 3 times. Then I smiled. For years, I'd fought under that flag. Now the law itself was fighting beside me. I printed the entire act, every clause, every line. Then I pulled out my DD-214, the paper that said honorable discharge. I still remember the smell of the folder, faint leather and old paper. At the top, in faded ink, was my name. Marcus D. Reed, United States Marine Corps. I traced the letters with my thumb, remembering the sandstorms in Kandahar, the long nights on watch, the quiet moments between explosions when we'd stare at the flag above the base and promise we'd make it home. Some of us did. Some didn't. And now, that same flag was being treated like an eyesore. That night, I wrote an email to the HOA board. I attached a copy of the law, my discharge papers, and one simple line. Before you fine another veteran for flying his flag, you might want to read federal law. I hit send. But I wasn't done. I wanted to say it to their faces. The next board meeting was scheduled for Thursday. I marked it on my calendar in red ink, Mission Day. The meeting hall was half full when I arrived. Mostly the same faces, retired couples, a few middle-aged professionals, and the board members at their usual long table. When I walked in, conversations quieted. I stood at the back for a minute, flag folded neatly under my arm, documents in hand. Then I walked forward, steady, calm, Marine posture. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. "I'm Marcus Reed," I said. "I've lived here 12 years. I served this country for 22. I unfolded the flag on the table, letting it stretch across the polished wood. Then I placed my DD-214 next to it. "This flag," I said, "flew above my base in Kandahar. It stood through sandstorms and rocket fire. And now you're telling me it doesn't belong in front of my own home?" You could have heard a pin drop. One board member shifted in his chair. Another looked down. The president, a woman in a crisp white blazer, crossed her arms. She said, "Mr. Reed, we're just following regulations." I nodded. "Then you might want to update your regulations. Because federal law says otherwise." And I read it out loud, every line of the Freedom to Display the American Flag Act. By the time I finished, the room was silent. No one had anything left to say. A week went by. Every morning, I'd check my mailbox, nothing. Until one Thursday afternoon, a letter appeared. Same logo. Same envelope. I opened it slowly, bracing for another threat. But this time, it was different. After legal review, all fines and violations have been rescinded. You are permitted to display the United States flag at your discretion. No apology. Just surrender. I laughed quietly, shook my head, and walked outside. The sun was setting over Riverside County, warm orange light spilling across the street. I looked up at my flag, still waving proudly. For a long moment, I just stood there. Neighbors began to step outside, pretending to water their lawns, pretending not to look. And then something unexpected happened. Across the street, one man raised his own flag. Then another. And another. By the next day, half the neighborhood had flags up. Maybe they finally understood what that cloth means. Maybe they just didn't want to be the ones who stayed silent. Either way, it mattered. For me, this wasn't just about rules or fines. It was about respect. Because when I fought for that flag overseas, I didn't ask who it would offend. And I sure as hell wasn't about to start now. I walked back to my porch, the folded letter still in my hand. The flag rustled above me, catching the last light of the day. And for the first time in a long time, I felt home. If you're watching this and you've ever been told to sit down, to stay quiet, or to just follow the rules, don't. Sometimes rules are written by people who've forgotten what freedom costs. You don't have to wear a uniform to stand up for what's right. All it takes is courage, and the belief that your home, your dignity, your flag, are worth protecting. I know a lot of you watching this have fought your own battles, with HOAs, with systems, with people who treat authority like a weapon. But here's the thing, power only works when we surrender to it. If you're a veteran, a homeowner, or anyone who's ever been bullied by bureaucracy, know this. The law is on your side more often than you think. And when it isn't, sometimes you have to become the reminder. Because freedom isn't a trophy someone hands you. It's a fire you keep alive, one act of defiance at a time. If this story speaks to you, share it. Not for views. Not for clicks. Share it so someone else out there remembers, you don't need permission to be proud of your country. These days, the flag still waves outside my porch in Riverside Meadows. Sometimes, when I'm sitting with my morning coffee, I see my neighbors glance up at it as they walk their dogs or head to work. Nobody complains anymore. In fact, a few even nod as they pass. Maybe that's their way of saying, we get it now. I've thought a lot about that first notice, the one that said violation. It used to make me angry. Now it makes me smile. Because every time I see that flag moving in the breeze, I remember something I learned long ago in the Marines. Freedom isn't free, but it's paid for every day by the people who refuse to surrender. And that's all I ever wanted. Not a fight. Not revenge. Just respect, for the flag, for the fallen, and for the promise that America is still worth standing up for. So if you ever find yourself in a battle that feels small, remember this. It's never about the flag, or the fine, or the rule. It's about what kind of person you become when you decide not to back down. I'm Marcus Reed. United States Marine Corps, retired. Still faithful. Still free. And this flag still flies.